saw you from across the room. When our eyes met, I never knew that I could feel this way, and it's kinda strange. Don't even know your name.
Hello wildflowers, your whimsical little garden fairy is back, and in this episode we're going to roll up our floral sleeves and get started on a whole new garden. That's right, from the ground up. It's going to take some time, some grit, and a whole lot of imagination, but I think we're up to the challenge, don't you? I must admit, summoning the energy to start over hasn't been easy. I've spent many an hour sitting out on the back veranda, just staring at the rather uninspiring lawn, feeling pretty daunted and wondering where on earth to begin. I suppose I wasn't really prepared to start all over, not so soon anyway, but that's what wildflowers do. Their tenacity means they will always find a way to bloom, no matter what the conditions. And so, in this episode, I wanted to share with you where I decided to make a start. First, by getting familiar with the existing plants and trees, deciding on a colour palette that could incorporate the vibrant magenta pinks, deep burgundy, and pops of dragonfire orange I found around the garden, but with a slightly gothic twist. I know it sounds a little crazy, but with some black garden furniture and plenty of soft pastel pinks, whites, apricots and lilacs, I think it's going to be rather spectacular. Once I decided on the colour palette, I began scouring my garden catalogues and creating vision boards. I'll share a link to my Pinterest board in the description below if you'd like to see it.
I know you, but I want to get to know you. Just wanna get to know you.
Well, we can't sit around daydreaming forever, wildflowers. At some point, I have to accept it's time to begin the hard work. Let's get up and let's do this. The next step is all about creating the bones of the garden, the structure and the landscaping. This is about giving it a flow of energy and encouraging a wildness, giving the flowers something soft to snuggle, like an ornate fence for the rambling roses to climb, or a meandering path for an herbaceous border to wind whimsically around. So, the second task I have in mind, to begin to create a bit of structure, is a classic cottage garden picket fence with two little swinging gates. And guess who's back to help me? That's right, Dad's back.
It's a bloody bird feeder.
With his carpentry skills, Irish fairy magic, and classic one-liners.
Think, think, think.
The idea is to paint this fence a deep charcoal to match the exterior of the house and create contrast against the pastel and pop-coloured blooms I intend to plant.
Up a bit. Yeah, that's alright.
We'll revisit the fence once I've finished painting, but now there's another big design challenge to tackle. That boring, straight concrete path that has been giving me eye twitches for weeks. You may recall in a previous episode, I talked about meandering motion in a cottage garden, designed to invite whimsical wanderings. So this boring, straight path had to go. But, you know, it almost defeated me, wildflowers, because these delicate fairy wings had a really hard time. So I had to call in some heavy machinery. Meet Tony, the Incredible Hulk. Yes. Yay, Tony! Now all I have to do is arrange the pieces. And yes, Dad, I should have worn gloves.
I can't believe you love me.
With the broken pieces of the original path, I was able to create a rambling stepping stone walkway all the way up to the garden shed. My idea is to plant a boulevard of blossoms all the way along, with perhaps a little love seat and an archway too. It may not look like much now, but in my imagination, I can already see my summer garden taking shape. My next idea to add structure to the new garden and add some instant colour to delight the fairies come springtime was to create a beautiful potted display of tightly planted bulbs at the entrance to the garden path. This idea was inspired by the incredible Claus Dalby, who I will link below. I just can't get enough of his jaw-dropping container gardens with their striking colour palettes of tulips, peonies, pansies, and other surprising combinations. And whilst my display this spring will be a little less extravagant, it will still be a lovely start and hopefully provide some gorgeous cut flowers to inspire my artwork. I chose a selection of daffodils, tulips, ranunculus, hyacinth and anemones in shades of white, pale pink, burgundy and black. But you know, it's really a bit of a risk not knowing what they'll look like until I see them bloom. But in the words of one of my favourite spiritual teachers, whatever arises, love that. I mean, I've never really seen a flower I didn't love, have you? Once all the bulbs were tucked into bed for the winter and I'd written them down in my garden journal, I arranged the pots around the step, mixing up their shapes and sizes, giving some thought to how tall each of the flowers will grow. Of course, the beauty of pots is I can always move things around once they start to bloom and I get a feel for how the display is coming together, what colours work where and where the sunshine hits. Then it's up the garden path to pop the potting mix away before we get started on the final project. Now, this little green witch couldn't face an entire winter without some magical flowers blooming in her garden, so I just had to treat myself to some winter roses in rich shades of plum, grey, black and raspberry. There's just something so bewitching and ever so slightly gothic about hellebores, don't you think? Blooming in winter, when most other plants are dormant, these mystical flowers symbolise rebirth and new beginnings, and summon the spirit of Hecate, goddess of witchcraft and magic. The way they thrive in harsh conditions and bring colour to a bleak landscape represents transformation, resilience, and ascension. And so I've decided to plant them in the dappled shade of a jacaranda tree to remind me of the magic of new beginnings.
I don't always believe in miracles, but I always wish on a shooting star. Yeah, we never spoke of it, we never did go too far. I just wanted to tell you that you're perfect as you are.
I just loved getting my hands in the soil again after what seemed an eternity. And the best part was that while I was down there, I looked up to discover a curious little tree elemental watching over me. He's a magical creature.
It is. You put some eyes on it. It's nice. Strange looking bloody thing.
Well, that's Dad's take on it. But Noah and I think he's rather cute and is a sure sign that the Fae folk have followed me here. I think I'll host a little tea party when springtime arrives to celebrate with all the magical creatures I've met in this garden so far. It sure is a curious little witch's garden.
As long as I got you right here, a little rain begins to fall down. Wash it away and see what stays around. And round we go now. I lay my eyes that you lay by my side. Radio loud, yeah, we get wet with the top down. But I don't care, as long as I got you right here with me.
I planted a lucky 7 different hellebores here, and use some recycled bricks to create a garden edge. I'll see how these go over the winter, as they do tend to multiply and reseed over the years, but I might introduce some summer annuals here too. Creating a floral wonderland from scratch certainly doesn't happen overnight. In fact, my last garden took 3 years of constant work, so I hope you'll stick with me as this new dream evolves. But you know, I also have that illustrated book I'm working on and a few spirit paintings to keep me busy over the winter. So wish me luck, wildflowers. I think I'm gonna need it. The larger hellebores are called Angel Glow, and I rather fancy they'll bring a touch of angelic radiance to the darker, more witchy vibe, because, you know, I like to keep one foot in each of the realms. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed this episode, sharing how I'm getting started on a brand new cottage garden. Beginning again from scratch is no easy task, but your wonderful comments and support here and over on Patreon means the world to me. With your love and encouragement, I feel energized and like anything is possible. And of course, I couldn't do it without Dad.
What are you going to do when you're planting a garden? Think, think, think. And don't, repeat, don't rush into it. Because otherwise you'll make mistakes and have to go back and fix them. End of story. Bye.
I don't care, as long as I got you right here. A little rain begins to fall down, wash it away and see what stays around. Round we go now, I lay my eyes at you laying by my side. Radio loud, yeah, we get wet with the top down. But I don't care, as long as I got you right here with me.
Check the colour of this card out. This is the bee's knees.
And with that last word from Dad's veggie garden, I'm wishing you all a magical solstice, and I'll see you again real soon, somewhere down the garden path where unicorns frolic and dragons dream.